Captain Jake Morrison stood in the center of the great chamber and felt very small. The walls curved high above him, made of some strange metal that seemed to glow with its own light. Around him sat 12 massive chairs, each one different from the others. Each chair held a being that could destroy his homeworld with a single command. This was his third time here. His third time asking the same question. His third time hoping for a different answer. The Galactic Council of Nexus Prime was the most powerful group in the known universe. Every species that mattered had a seat here. Every species except humans. Jake looked at his hands. They were shaking just a little. He hoped none of the aliens could see it. Behind him stood Commander Lisa Parks, the best diplomat Earth had ever produced. She had spent 20 years learning alien languages and customs. She knew more about galactic politics than anyone alive. But even she looked nervous. The first to speak was Krethor of the Zephyrians. His blue skin gleamed in the strange light of the chamber. His forearms moved as he talked, making gestures that Jake had learned meant disgust. "We have reviewed your species once again," Krethor said. His voice sounded like wind through metal. "The answer remains the same. Humans are too violent, too unpredictable. You have wars on your own planet even now." Jake wanted to argue. He wanted to point out that the Zephyrians had fought wars for 3,000 years before joining the Federation, but he knew better. He had tried that argument. Before, the second speaker was Vel-9 of the Vortani. The crystal being flickered with angry red light as it spoke. The Vortani did not have mouths, so their words came from speakers built into their bodies. "Your species shows no unity," Vel-9 said. "You have hundreds of different governments, hundreds of different languages. How can we trust a species that cannot even trust itself?" Commander Parks stepped forward. "Honored Council, our diversity is our strength. Different perspectives help us solve problems in new ways." The crystal being flickered brighter red. "Chaos is not strength. Order is strength. Unity is strength. Your species has neither," the third speaker made Jake's skin crawl. Seseknar of the Serpentine Dominion looked like a giant snake with arms. His yellow eyes never blinked as he stared at Jake. "Humans are predators," Seseknar hissed. "We have studied your history. You hunt other species to extinction. You destroy your own environment for profit. A predator species cannot be trusted with galactic technology." Jake felt anger building in his chest. "We've changed. We've learned from our mistakes. Our planet is cleaner now than it has been in centuries." "A few decades of improvement mean nothing," Seseknar replied. "Your species is barely out of its caves. You reached space only yesterday in galactic terms." The fourth speaker was Threngul of the Aquatic Meridians. The water-breathing alien spoke through a translation device that made his words sound bubbly and strange. "Your emotional responses are too extreme," Threngul gurgled. "Love, hate, anger, joy. These feelings make you unreliable. A stable species thinks with logic, not emotion." Lisa stepped forward again. "Emotions help us understand others. They help us form strong bonds with allies. They also help you form strong hatreds with enemies," Threngul replied. "We have seen your wars. We have seen your genocides. Emotion without control leads to destruction." Jake looked around the chamber. 8 more beings sat in their massive chairs. 8 more species that would vote against humanity. He already knew what each one would say. The Crystalline Overmind would call humans too chaotic. The Hive Collective would say humans could not work as a team. The Metal Lords would claim humans were too biological to understand true efficiency. The Plant Commonwealth would argue that humans destroyed too many living things. One by one, they spoke. One by one, they listed humanity's flaws. Jake had heard it all before. Humans were too young, too violent, too emotional, too chaotic, too diverse, too unpredictable. Finally, Elder Kess of the Hive Collective rose from her chair. She was the most powerful being in the chamber. Her species controlled more star systems than any other. When she spoke, everyone listened. "Captain Morrison," she said. Her voice sounded like 1,000 insects buzzing together. "We do not reject humanity out of cruelty. We reject humanity out of necessity. Jake looked up at her. Elder Kess was beautiful in an alien way, with iridescent skin and compound eyes that seemed to see everything. The galaxy is a delicate balance, she continued. Each species brings something unique to the Federation. The Zephyrians bring order, the Vortani bring logic. The Serpentines bring patience, the Meridians bring calm. She paused and looked directly at Jake. What do humans bring? What can you offer that we do not already have? Jake felt the weight of his entire species on his shoulders. 3 billion humans back on Earth were counting on him. Colonies on Mars and Europa waited for his answer. The future of humanity depended on what he said next. We bring hope, he said quietly. Elder Kess tilted her head. Hope? When things go wrong, we don't give up. When the odds are against us, we find a way. When everyone says something is impossible, we try anyway. Jake's voice grew stronger. You call it chaos. We call it creativity. You call it unpredictable. We call it adaptive. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Elder Kess spoke again. Your species lacks the evolutionary wisdom needed for galactic citizenship. Perhaps in a few thousand years, you will be ready. The vote is called. Jake watched as each alien representative pressed a button on their chair. Red lights appeared above each seat. 12 red lights, 12 votes against humanity. The motion is denied, Elder Kess announced. Humanity will remain quarantined to the Sol system. This council is adjourned. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Lisa put a hand on his shoulder, but it didn't help. They had failed. Again, as they walked toward the exit, Jake noticed something strange. Groups of aliens were gathering in corners of the chamber, speaking in hushed voices. Their body language looked tense, worried. Some kept glancing toward the viewing screens that showed space around the station. Commander? Jake whispered to Lisa. Do you see that? Lisa followed his gaze. They're scared of something. But before Jake could think more about it, a Zephyrian guard approached them. Your ship is ready for departure. You must leave immediately. Jake wanted to ask questions, but the guard's tone made it clear that questions were not welcome. As they walked toward the docking bay, Jake heard fragments of alien conversations. Words like signals and outer rim and no contact. Something was happening in the galaxy. Something the Council didn't want humans to know about. As the UES Horizon undocked from Nexus Prime, Jake stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there was a mystery. And despite what the Council thought about human curiosity, Jake was determined to solve it. Lieutenant Ben Carter rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the screen again. The numbers had not changed. 3 months of watching the edge of nothing had finally given him something to see, and he wished it had not. The monitoring station hung in the dark between stars, so far from anything that Earth was just a distant memory. Ben had volunteered for this assignment because he wanted to be alone. After the Council's rejection, he could not stand being around other people. Everyone on Earth was angry or sad or both. Out here, he could just do his job and try not to think about humanity's future, but now he had to think about everyone's future. The readings on his screen showed massive objects moving through the void between galaxies, not ships, not anything that should exist. These things were bigger than space stations, bigger than moons. They moved in perfect formation at speeds that made no sense. Ben checked his equipment 3 times. The sensors were working fine. The computer was working fine. He was not going crazy. Something huge was coming toward their galaxy, and it was still months away from the outer rim. He sent a message to Earth first. Protocol said he should contact the nearest Federation outpost, but Ben wanted his own people to know. The message would take weeks to reach home, but at least someone would have the data. Then he did what he was supposed to do. He opened a channel to the Federation monitoring network and uploaded his readings. The response came faster than he expected. A cold, mechanical voice spoke through the speakers. Human Monitoring Station 77 Alpha. Your readings are incorrect. Return to standard patrol duties immediately. Ben stared at the speaker. This is Lieutenant Carter. I'm sending you the raw data. These readings are accurate. Negative, your equipment is malfunctioning. Submit a maintenance request and resume normal operations. The channel went dead. Ben sat back in his chair and felt a chill run down his spine. The Federation had looked at his data for less than 5 minutes before dismissing it. They had not asked for more information. They had not sent a ship to investigate. They had just told him he was wrong and cut the connection. Either they already knew about the objects or they did not want to know. On the other side of human space, Dr. Amy Rodriguez was having a very different kind of bad day. The derelict ship floating outside her research station was old, older than anything humans had ever found. The metal was black and twisted, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Amy had been studying alien artifacts for 15 years. She had learned to read 12 different alien languages. She had translated everything from shopping lists to religious texts, but these symbols were different. They seemed to move when she was not looking directly at them. The ship had crashed into an asteroid in the outer colonies 3 days ago. The colonists had called Earth immediately, and Amy had been the first scientist to respond. Now she wished someone else had taken the job. She floated through the ship's corridors in her environmental suit, recording everything. The walls were covered in the strange symbols. They formed patterns that almost made sense like a language. She had once known but forgotten in what might have been the ship's command center. Amy found a device that was still working. It projected images into the air when she touched it. The images showed star maps, but not any stars she recognized. Then the device showed her something that made her blood turn cold. The images showed galaxies. Hundreds of them, and one by one, they went dark, not destroyed, not conquered. They simply stopped existing, as if they had never been there at all. The final image showed creatures that looked like nightmares. They moved through space without ships, feeding on the light of stars. Behind them, reality itself seemed to unravel. Amy's hands shook as she recorded the images. At the bottom of the projection, alien text appeared. Her translation program worked on it for several minutes before producing a result. The devourers return when the cycle ends. All worlds will feed the hunger. All light will fade. This is the final warning. The device went silent and dark. Amy tried to restart it, but nothing happened. Whatever power had kept it running for who knew how long had finally died. She gathered her equipment and headed back to her ship as fast as she could. This information had to reach Earth immediately. Back on the monitoring station, Ben was still trying to contact the Federation when his communication array lit up with incoming signals. Dozens of them, all from the outer rim of the galaxy. He opened the first signal and heard static mixed with screaming. An alien voice speaking a language he did not recognize was cut off in mid-sentence. The signal died. The second signal was from a Meridian colony. The voice was calm at first, reporting unusual energy readings. Then the tone changed to panic. They're draining everything. The sun is going out. The stars are disappearing. Send. Help. Send. Static. Ben opened signal after signal. Zephyrian outposts going silent. Vortania research stations losing power. Hive collective worlds reporting that their queens had stopped communicating, all of them from the outer rim. All of them in the same general direction as the massive objects Ben had detected. He tried to contact the Federation again. This time, a different voice answered. Human Station, you are ordered to cease all communications with Federation networks. Return to Earth space immediately. Wait, Ben said. I'm receiving distress calls from your colonies. Something is attacking the outer rim. Those signals are classified. End this transmission now. The channel went dead again. Ben stared at his controls in disbelief. The Federation was cutting off human access to their communication networks. They were hiding something huge. Captain Morrison was halfway back to Earth when the messages started arriving. First Ben's report about the massive objects. Then Amy's discovery of the ancient warning. Finally, fragments of distress calls that Ben had managed to record before losing contact with the Federation network. Morrison called his senior staff together in the ship's conference room. The holographic display showed Amy's alien images alongside Ben's sensor readings. The timeline was becoming clear. They knew, said Chief Engineer Danny Walsh. The Federation knew this was coming, Commander Parks nodded grimly. That explains the behavior at the council meeting. They were distracted, worried about something else. Morrison studied the star charts. If this is real, if these Devour things are heading for the galaxy, then the Federation just made a huge mistake. What do you mean? Asked Walsh. Morrison pointed to the projection showing the creatures feeding on stars. They rejected humanity because we're too chaotic, too unpredictable. But if you're facing an enemy that adapts to logical responses, chaos might be exactly what you need. Parks looked at the images of dying galaxies. They're going to fight this war using the same strategies that have worked for thousands of years, against an enemy that has destroyed hundreds of civilizations. And they're doing it without the one species that specializes in fighting dirty. Morrison added. The ship's communication system chimed with an incoming message. Morrison opened the channel and found himself looking at Admiral Kate Brooks back on Earth. Jake, she said, I've been reviewing the data from your people in the field. How fast can you get home? 3 days at maximum burn. Why? Brooks looked. Older than Morrison had ever seen her. Because I think we're about to get a call from the same people who just told us we weren't good enough to join their club. Morrison felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. They're going to ask for our help. And when they do, Brooks said, we're going to have to decide if saving people who rejected us is worth risking everything we have. The transmission ended, leaving Morrison staring at the star charts. Somewhere out there, an unstoppable force was consuming everything in its path. The galaxy's greatest civilizations were about to face their darkest hour. And humanity, the species too chaotic and unpredictable to be trusted, might be the only hope anyone had left. Captain Morrison knew he was breaking about 15 different Federation laws, but he did not care anymore. The U's horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, where the last Zephyrian science vessel had sent a distress call 3 days ago. The system looked wrong. Morrison had seen star charts of this place before. It should have had 6 planets orbiting a bright yellow star. Now he counted only 4 planets, and the star itself seemed dimmer than it should be. Danny, are you getting readings on that Zephyrian ship? Morrison asked his chief engineer. Danny Walsh bent over his console, his face lit by the glow of multiple screens. I've got it, Captain. About 2 million kilometers from our position. But something's not right. Define not right. The ship is there, but it's not putting out any energy signatures. No power, no life support, no nothing. It's like someone drained every bit of energy from the entire vessel. Commander Parks moved to the sensor station. Are there any life signs? That's the weird part, Danny said. I'm reading life signs, but they're all wrong. Heart rates are almost 0. Brain activity is barely registering. It's like the crew is in some kind of suspended animation. Morrison felt ice in his stomach. Take us in closer. Full defensive protocols. The horizon moved carefully toward the Zephyrian vessel. As they got closer, Morrison could see that the ship looked physically undamaged. No burn marks from weapons. No hull breaches. It just floated in space like a giant piece of dead metal. Captain, Danny said quietly, I'm also detecting some kind of residual energy field around the ship. It's not like anything in our databases. Can you analyze it? Working on it now. The readings are... Captain, this energy signature doesn't match anything from any known species. It's like the ship was exposed to some kind of technology that operates on completely different physical principles. Morrison made a decision that would change everything. Prepare a boarding team, Danny, Lisa, and me. Full environmental suits and portable power sources. Sir, regulations say we should contact the Federation before boarding an alien vessel, Parks pointed out. The Federation told us to go home and mind our own business, Morrison replied. As far as I'm concerned, that makes this our business now. The boarding shuttle attached to the Zephyrian ship's docking port without any trouble. The airlock still worked, but everything was running on emergency power that was slowly dying. Inside the ship, Morrison felt like he was walking through a tomb. The corridors were dark except for their helmet lights. Emergency lighting flickered, weakly in some sections and was completely dead in others. The artificial gravity is still working, Parks noted. But it's weak, maybe running at 60%. They found the first crew member in the ship's mess hall. Zephyrion sat at a table with a meal half finished in front of him. His arms were frozen in place, as if time had stopped in the middle of bringing food to his mouth. His eyes were open but completely vacant. "He's alive," Danny said, checking his medical scanner. Heart rate is 3 beats per minute. Brain activity is minimal but present. It's like he's been put into some kind of stasis field. Morrison leaned closer to examine the alien. The Zephyrion's blue skin had taken on a grayish tint, and there were strange patterns of discoloration around his eyes and hands. "Danny, can you wake him up?" "I don't know, Captain." "I'm not even sure what's been done to him. And I'm definitely not sure it would be safe to reverse it." They found the rest of the crew in similar states throughout the ship, all alive but barely functioning. All frozen in whatever they had been doing when the attack happened. The ship's computer core was still partially functional. Danny managed to extract the final logs while Parks tried to make sense of the Zephyrian medical data. "Captain, you need to hear this," Danny said. Morrison plugged his suit's communication system into the ship's speakers. A Zephyrian voice filled the corridor, speaking in accented but clear human English. "This is Science Commander Velkrath of the exploration vessel Wind Dancer. We are under attack by unknown forces. The enemy vessels do not match any known configuration. They appear to be alive somehow. They are draining our power systems faster than we can compensate." The recording continued with sounds of alarms and panicked voices in the background. "The attackers are not using conventional weapons. They are somehow extracting energy directly from our ship's core, from our crew, from space itself. We have tried to retreat, but our engines are failing. The enemy has surrounded us with some kind of field that makes faster than light travel impossible." Morrison heard the fear in the alien's voice and felt his own fear growing. Final log entry: the creatures are boarding our ship. They do not use airlocks or docking ports. They simply pass through our hull as if it were not there. I can see them in the corridor outside the bridge. They look like shadows given form. Reality bends around them. Time moves differently near them. The recording became distorted, filled with sounds that made Morrison's teeth hurt. "They are not killing us. They are doing something worse. They are taking our time, our energy, our existence itself. We will remain conscious but unable to act, unable to die, unable to live. This is not death. This is something beyond death. Warn the Federation. Warn everyone. They call themselves Devourers, and they hunger for..." The recording ended in static. Morrison, Parks, and Walsh stood in the dark corridor for a long moment, processing what they had heard. "Danny, did you get all of that recorded?" Morrison finally asked. "Every word, Captain. And I managed to download their sensor logs from the attack. The data is incredible." "What do you mean?" "The Zephyrian sensors tracked the attacking vessels. Captain, they came from outside the galaxy." "And they're not alone?" "The sensors detected a massive fleet behind them, still in the void between galaxies." Parks checked her own readings. "How massive?" "Thousands of ships, Commander." "Maybe tens?" "Of thousands, all heading directly for the galactic core." Morrison felt the weight of the universe settling on his shoulders. How long until they reach the inner systems? Danny worked on his calculations for several minutes. At their current speed, they'll hit the outer colonies in 6 months. The core systems in 18 months. "And the Federation knows about this," Parks said. It was not a question. Morrison nodded grimly. "They've known for months. That's why they were so distracted at the council meeting. That's why they're cutting off human communications. They don't want us to know they're losing." Danny pulled up. "More data from the Zephyrian computers." "Captain, I found something else. The Federation has fought these Devourers before. 3 separate engagements, all defeats. How bad?" "Complete fleet destruction, no survivors. The Federation's best weapons had no effect." Their most advanced shields failed instantly. Everything they tried was useless. Morrison looked around the dead ship and made a decision. Danny, can you figure out how their technology works? The Devourers, I mean. I can try, Captain. But from what I'm seeing, their technology operates on principles we don't understand. They manipulate energy and matter in ways that our science says should be impossible. Good, Morrison said. Because our science also says that humans should be too primitive to matter in galactic politics. Maybe being primitive is exactly what we need. Parks looked at him. What are you thinking, Jake? Morrison smiled grimly. I'm thinking that the Federation is trying to fight an advanced enemy using advanced tactics. But what if the enemy expects advanced tactics? What if they've adapted to defeat every civilized response? You want to fight them with primitive weapons, Danny said, understanding. I want to fight them with human weapons, Morrison corrected. Weapons so crude and simple that their advanced defenses won't know how to stop them. They spent another hour downloading everything they could. From the Zephyrian ship, sensor logs, tactical data, medical readings from the crew. Everything that might help humanity understand what they were facing. As they prepared to leave, Morrison took one last look at the frozen Zephyrian in the mess hall. The alien who had been eating when his world ended, who would remain conscious, but unable to act until his body finally gave out. We're going to stop them, Morrison promised the empty eyes. We're going to stop them, and we're going to do it our way. The shuttle returned to the horizon carrying more than just data. It carried proof that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations were helpless against this threat, and it carried the seeds of a plan that would either save everyone or doom humanity to the same fate as the Zephyrian crew. As the horizon jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading back toward Earth, Morrison began composing a message to Admiral Brooks. A message that would change everything. Colonel Steve Hughes stared at the holographic display in Luna Command Center and tried to wrap his mind around what he was seeing. The data from Captain Morrison's mission painted a picture that made every military academy textbook worthless. The enemy could drain energy from starships faster than the ships could produce it. They could pass through solid matter like it was empty space. They could manipulate time itself to trap their victims in conscious paralysis. And they had destroyed every Federation fleet sent against them without taking a single casualty. This is impossible, said General Patricia Stone, head of Earth's Space Defense Forces. No military force could be this overwhelming. That's what the Federation thought too, Hughes replied. And look how that worked out for them. Around the conference table sat the best military minds humanity had produced. Admirals, generals, tactical specialists, and weapons designers. All of them looking at an enemy that made conventional warfare meaningless. Dr. Amy Rodriguez had flown in from her research station to present her findings about the ancient warnings. She stood at the front of the room, displaying images from the derelict ship. The Devourers aren't just another alien species, she explained. They're something that exists outside normal space-time. Every million years they emerge from the void between galaxies to feed on the energy of living civilizations. Admiral Kate Brooks leaned forward. How have they been stopped before? They haven't, Amy said quietly. According to these records, they consume entire galaxies and then return to the void to digest their meal. The only reason any civilizations survive is that the Devourers eventually move on to other galaxy clusters. The room fell silent. Hughes felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. So the Federation is trying to fight an enemy that has never been defeated, he said. An enemy that feeds on the very technology they're using against it. Exactly, Amy nodded. The more advanced the civilization, the more energy the Devourers can drain from them. It's like trying to fight a fire with gasoline. Hughes stood and walked to the display showing the Devourer fleet movements. What about us? What happens when they reach Earth? Amy's face went pale. Humans produce less energy than most galactic species. Our technology is primitive compared to the Federation. In theory, we might last longer than the advanced civilizations. How much longer? Maybe days instead of hours. Hughes turned to face his staff. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a choice. We can sit here and wait for extinction, or we can do something. Stupid. General Stone raised an eyebrow. Define stupid, Colonel. We fight them with weapons so primitive that their energy-draining technology can't affect them. The room erupted in confused voices. Hughes held up his hand for silence. Think about it, he continued. They've adapted to defeat energy weapons. Plasma cannons, fusion bombs, everything the Federation throws at them. But what if we throw rocks? Rocks? Asked Admiral Brooks. Kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, nuclear fission bombs. Technology so crude that the Devourers have never encountered them. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward. Colonel, that's actually brilliant. The ancient records show that the Devourers learn from each encounter. They adapt their defenses based on the weapons used against them. But they've been fighting advanced civilizations for millions of years. They've never fought humans. Hughes said with a grim smile. Engineer Danny Walsh had returned to Earth with Captain Morrison and was sitting at the far end of the table. Colonel, I've been analyzing the energy signatures from the Zephyrian ship. The Devourers use some kind of field that can absorb and redirect any form of directed energy. What about undirected energy? Hughes asked. You mean like an explosion? Something that releases energy in all directions at once? Walsh thought for a moment. Their fields might not be able to handle that. They seem designed to counter-focused attacks. Hughes turned to the weapons development team. How fast can we retrofit our ships with primitive weapons? Dr. Ellen Cross, the head of weapons research, looked skeptical. Colonel, you're talking about stripping out our most advanced systems and replacing them with technology from the 20th century. Exactly. It would take months to redesign our entire fleet. We don't have months, Admiral Brooks said. Latest intelligence suggests the Devourers will reach the Outer Rim in 4 weeks. Hughes felt the timeline crushing down on him. Then we don't redesign the fleet, we build new ships. Fast, simple, and cheap. With what? General Stone asked. Our shipyards are designed for advanced vessels. We don't have the infrastructure for mass production of primitive craft. Captain Morrison spoke for the first time since arriving. What about the old military factories on Earth? The ones we shut down after joining the Galactic community? Hughes felt a spark of hope. The weapons plants we closed because they were too polluting and destructive for civilized space. Those factories could produce chemical explosives and kinetic weapons faster than any. Federation shipyard could build a single energy cannon, Morrison continued. Dr. Cross was already working on her tablet. Colonel, if we're really going to do this, we need volunteer crews. These ships won't have the safety features or life support systems of modern vessels. How dangerous are we talking? Admiral Brooks asked. Very dangerous, Cross replied honestly. No energy shields, minimal armor, basic life support. Anyone who flies these ships will have maybe a 50% chance of survival in combat. Hughes looked around the room. I'll take those odds. What are our chances if we do nothing? 0%, Amy said quietly. Admiral Brooks stood up. Colonel Hughes, I'm giving you authorization to proceed with this plan. Dr. Cross, you'll have unlimited resources for weapons development. Captain Morrison, I want you to coordinate with our intelligence networks. Find out everything you can about Devourer movements. Hughes felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. Admiral, there's one more thing. If we're going to fight this war, we need to fight it like humans, not like Federation members. What do you mean? I mean we use every dirty trick we know. Kamikaze attacks, suicide runs, asymmetric warfare. Everything the Federation considers uncivilized. Admiral Brooks nodded grimly. Do whatever it takes, Colonel. Over the next week, Earth transformed into something it had not been for centuries, a military-industrial complex focused entirely on war. Factories that had been museums were reopened and retooled. Scientists who had spent their careers developing peaceful technologies were suddenly designing better ways to kill. The volunteer response was overwhelming. When Admiral Brooks announced that Earth needed pilots for dangerous experimental ships, 50,000 people applied within the first day. Most were rejected for being too valuable in other roles, but the military found 1,200 volunteers who met their criteria. Captain Morrison worked with Dr. Rodriguez to analyze every piece of intelligence they could gather. The Devourers moved in predictable patterns, following energy sources like moths to a flame. They seemed drawn to the most powerful civilizations first, which explained why they were targeting the Galactic core. Engineer Walsh led a team of designers in creating the simplest possible space fighters. No energy weapons, no shields, no artificial gravity, just engines, life support, and payload bays filled with chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles. It's like building spacecraft for cavemen, Walsh told Hughes during one of their progress meetings. Good, Hughes replied. Cavemen know how to hunt. Dr. Cross made a breakthrough when she discovered that nuclear fission reactions produced a type of energy signature that the Devourers had never encountered. Their energy absorption fields were designed for fusion reactions and more advanced technologies. We can make dirty bombs, she explained to Hughes. Not efficient, not clean, but completely alien to anything they've seen before. Hughes approved. The production of 2,000 fission warheads, despite knowing that using them would contaminate huge areas of space. As Earth's war machine spun up to full production, a message arrived from the Federation. It was brief and to the point. The Galactic Council recognizes the extreme nature of current circumstances. We formally request immediate military assistance from the human government. Admiral Brooks called Hughes into her office to discuss the message. They're asking for our help, she said. The same people who told us we weren't worthy to join their federation. Hughes looked out the window at the factories below, where workers were building weapons of war around the clock. What? Do you want to tell them, Admiral? Brooks smiled coldly. Tell them we'll be happy to help. But we do this our way, with our weapons under human command. And if they refuse, then they can face extinction with their dignity intact. Hughes drafted the response message and sent it to the Galactic Council. Then he returned to the weapon. Factories where humanity was preparing to save a galaxy that had never believed in them. In 3 weeks, the Devourers would reach the Outer Rim. In 3 weeks, the galaxy would learn whether chaos and primitive violence could defeat an enemy that had never known defeat. Hughes looked at the volunteers, training with their crude weapons, and felt something he had not felt since the Council's rejection. He felt hope. The emergency signal came at 3 a.m, Earth time. Admiral Kate Brooks was pulled from sleep by her aide, who looked pale and shaken. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. They say it's urgent. Brooks threw on her uniform and rushed to the communication center. On the main screen, Elder Kess of the Hive Collective appeared. The proud alien leader looked broken, her compound eyes dim with exhaustion. Admiral Brooks, Kess said, her voice lacking its usual authority, the outer defensive line has fallen. We have lost contact with 17 star systems in the last 6 hours. Brooks felt her stomach drop. The timeline had accelerated. Elder Kess, our intelligence suggested we had more time. The Devourers are moving faster than anticipated. They seem to grow stronger with each system they consume. Kess paused, and Brooks could see the pain in the alien's expression. Admiral, we formally request immediate military assistance from Earth. Under human command? Brooks asked, Kess's pride warred with desperation for a long moment. Yes, under human command. We will follow your tactical directives, Brooks nodded. We'll deploy immediately. But Elder Kess, you need to understand something. We're not going to fight this war the way you expect. What do you mean? You'll see. 3 hours later, Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, the first of Earth's new primitive warships. Around him, his crew prepared for a battle unlike anything in galactic history. The ship was barely 2 weeks old. Built in the emergency factories of Luna, it looked nothing like the sleek vessels of the Federation. The Defiance was angular and ugly, built for function rather than beauty. Its hull was thick steel plating. That would have been considered primitive 50 years ago. Its weapons were chemical rockets and kinetic cannons that fired simple metal slugs. Its crew of 40 had trained for exactly 12 days. Captain, said Lieutenant Kelly Stone, his navigation officer. We're approaching the rally point. I'm reading Federation ships on sensors. Morrison looked at the tactical display. 12. Massive Federation warships hung in space, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor and energy shields. Each one was 10 times larger than the Defiance and carried enough firepower to level a planet. Open a channel to the Federation fleet, Morrison ordered. The face of Admiral Velnine appeared on screen. The Vortani's crystal form flickered with nervous energy. Captain Morrison, Velnine said, we were expecting a larger human fleet. Morrison smiled grimly. This is our fleet, Admiral. 50 ships with volunteer crews. 50? Velnine's voice rose in disbelief. Captain, we are facing thousands of Devourer vessels. Your 50 primitive ships cannot possibly make a difference. Watch us, Morrison replied. Behind the Defiance. 49 other human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They looked like a collection of scrap metal compared to the Federation vessels. Their crews were miners, factory workers, retired military personnel, and civilians who had volunteered to die for a galaxy that had rejected them. Rick Turner, the demolitions expert on Morrison's ship, checked his weapons one final time. The payload bay held 200 chemical explosive missiles, each one armed with a timer rather than sophisticated targeting systems. In the old days, people would have called them bombs with engines. Captain, called out Ensign Tracy Mills. From the sensor station, I'm detecting the Devourer fleet. Distance is 1 million kilometers and closing. Morrison looked at the tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. The Devourer ships appeared on screen as dark shapes that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved in perfect formation, thousands of vessels that looked more grown than built. Federation fleet, this is Morrison. You need to fall back to the second defensive line. Negative, Admiral Velnine replied. We will stand and fight. Admiral, your energy weapons will only make them stronger. Please fall back and let us handle the first wave. Captain Morrison, with respect, your primitive vessels cannot survive what destroyed our most advanced battle groups. Morrison watched the Devourer fleet approaching. The enemy ships were beautiful in a terrible way, like living shadows given form. Reality seemed to bend around them, making them hard to focus on directly. All human ships, Morrison broadcast. This is it. Remember your training. No energy weapons, no shields, no fancy maneuvers. We go in fast, we hit hard, and we get out. For Earth. For Earth, came 49 responses. The human fleet accelerated toward the Devourers at maximum burn. Their primitive engines left trails of chemical exhaust that looked crude next to the clean energy drives of Federation ships. But they were faster than the Devourers expected. The first surprise came when the Devourer energy drain fields had no effect on the human ships. The fields that could paralyze Federation vessels in seconds simply passed through the human craft without resistance. Morrison's ship shook as they entered weapons range. Kelly, take us right down their throats. Rick, arm all missiles. Missiles armed, Captain. Chemical timers set for impact plus 2 seconds. The Devourers opened fire with weapons that twisted space itself. Beams of pure darkness lanced out, designed to drain the life from enemy ships. The Federation vessels behind the humans began losing power immediately, their crews falling into the same temporal stasis that had trapped the Zephyrians, but the human ships flew through the dark energy beams as if they were not there. Impossible. Admiral Velnine whispered over the communication channel. Morrison's ship reached the Devourer formation and released its full payload. 200 chemical explosive missiles streaked toward the enemy vessels. The Devourers tried to absorb the energy from the missiles, but chemical explosives did not work like energy weapons. They simply exploded. The first Devourer ship to be hit seemed genuinely surprised. The creature that served as its consciousness had never encountered weapons that could not be drained or redirected. The chemical explosion tore through its living hull, causing damage that its regenerative systems could not immediately repair across the battlefield. Human ships released their primitive weapons. Missiles, kinetic rounds, and nuclear fission bombs struck the Devourer fleet. The enemy ships, which had adapted to counter every advanced weapon in the galaxy, had no defense against technologies they had never encountered. Rick Turner's demolitions training proved invaluable. "Captain, aim for the bright spots on their HULLs. Those look like power nodes." The human fleet coordinated their attacks, targeting the glowing sections of Devourer ships with concentrated barrages of explosive weapons. Ship after ship in the enemy formation began to slow, their perfect formations breaking apart, but the victory came at a cost. The Defiance shook as a Devourer weapon finally found its mark, not through energy drain but through pure kinetic force. The ship's primitive armor buckled, and warning alarms filled the bridge. "Hull breach on Deck 3, reported Tracy Mills. "We're losing atmosphere." Morrison made a decision that would echo through galactic history. "All ships, this is Morrison. If your ship is damaged beyond repair, ram the largest Devourer vessel you can find. Make every shot count." Across the human fleet, damaged ships turned toward the enemy. The UES Courage, its engines failing, accelerated directly into a massive Devourer vessel. The ship's nuclear reactor overloaded on impact, creating a fission explosion that the enemy had never experienced before. The Devourer ship died. For the first time in 1,000,000 years, one of the creatures that called themselves Devourers had been destroyed in combat. The psychological impact rippled through their fleet faster than the physical damage. Admiral Velnine watched in amazement as the human fleet, outnumbered 100-1, began systematically destroying Devourer vessels with weapons that belonged in a museum. "Captain Morrison," Velnine called over the communication channel, "how is this possible?" Morrison, bleeding from a head wound as his ship shook under enemy fire, smiled grimly. "Admiral, the Devourers have been fighting civilized species for millions of years. They've never fought barbarians." The battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, the human fleet had lost 37 ships and their crews, but they had destroyed over 300 Devourer vessels and forced the remainder to retreat. Back toward the galactic rim, Morrison stood on the damaged bridge of the Defiance and looked at the Federation ships, their crews slowly recovering from the temporal stasis effects. For the first time since humanity had requested membership in the Galactic Federation, the aliens looked at humans with something other than dismissal. They looked at humans with respect. "All Federation vessels," Morrison broadcast. "The outer rim is secure for now, but this was just the first wave. The main Devourer fleet is still coming." Admiral Velnine's voice came over the speaker, filled with wonder. "Captain Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Federation, I formally request that humanity take command of our combined defense efforts." Morrison looked at the stars, where the bodies of human volunteers drifted in the cold vacuum. Heroes who had died to save people who had never believed in them. "Admiral," Morrison said quietly, "we'll save your galaxy. But we do it our way." 1 year after the Battle of the Outer Rim, Admiral Jake Morrison stood once again in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. But everything had changed. The walls still curved high above him, made of the same strange glowing metal. The 12 massive chairs still held beings who could destroy worlds with a single command. But now those beings looked at him with respect instead of dismissal. Morrison wore his dress uniform, the dark blue fabric marked with ribbons that told the story of humanity's war against the Devourers. The Medal of Galactic Service hung around his neck. The first time the Federation had ever awarded their highest honor to a human dot. Behind him stood Commander Lisa Parks, now wearing the rank insignia of a Federation Diplomatic Corps leader. To his right was Colonel Steve Hughes, who had been promoted to general after designing the tactics that saved the galaxy. Dr. Amy Rodriguez sat in the observer section, her research having provided the key to understanding Devourer technology, but there were empty spaces too. Empty spaces for Captain Morrison's original crew, for the volunteers who had flown primitive ships into certain death, for the thousands of humans who had answered when the galaxy called. Elder Kess rose from her chair, but this time her gesture was one of respect rather than judgment. Her compound eyes were bright with something Morrison had never seen before, gratitude. "Admiral Morrison," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. 1 year ago, this council rejected humanity's application for Federation membership. We called your species too violent, too chaotic, too unpredictable. Morrison remembered that day clearly. The pain of rejection, the frustration of being dismissed, the anger at being called unworthy. We were wrong, Tess continued. Not because those traits do not exist in humanity, but because we failed to understand that sometimes chaos is exactly what the universe needs. Around the chamber, the other council members nodded their agreement. Krethor of the Zephyrians spoke next, his forearms moving in gestures that Morrison now recognized as deep respect. The Devourer War lasted 8 months, Krethor said. In that time, humanity taught us lessons that our civilizations had forgotten over millennia of peace and order. Morrison thought about those 8 months. After the first battle, the Devourers had adapted quickly, learning to counter some of humanity's primitive weapons. But humans had adapted faster, constantly changing tactics and developing new approaches to warfare. The Federation had watched in amazement as human engineers built weapons from scrap metal and spare parts. They had seen human pilots volunteer for missions with zero survival probability. They had witnessed human commanders make decisions that defied all military logic but somehow worked. VL-9 of the Vortani flickered with warm golden light as she spoke. Your species showed us that innovation comes not from perfection, but from the willingness to try impossible things. Morrison remembered the Battle of the Core Worlds when human ships had used garbage and industrial waste as weapons, turning space debris into kinetic missiles that the Devourers could not absorb. He remembered the Siege of Nexus Prime, when human volunteers had manually piloted nuclear warheads into Devourer command ships, knowing they would not survive the mission. The Federation's military doctrine had remained unchanged for 1,000 years, said Seseknar of the Serpentine Dominion. We fought with honor, with logic, with predictable strategies. The Devourers had learned to counter every move we could make. Morrison nodded. The Federation's greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. Their advanced technology and logical thinking patterns had made them predictable to an enemy that learned from every encounter. Humanity brought chaos to the battlefield. Seseknar continued. Unpredictable tactics, impossible strategies, weapons that should not work but did. You fought dirty, and in doing so you saved us all. The final battle had taken place in the void between galaxies, where the main Devourer fleet had gathered to plan their final assault. Morrison had led a combined human-alien fleet of 10,000 ships into that dark space, carrying every chemical explosive and nuclear weapon that Earth's factories could produce. The battle had lasted 3 days. Human ships had used ramming attacks, suicide runs, and coordinated strikes that appeared suicidal, but were actually carefully calculated risks. The Devourers, creatures that had consumed hundreds of galaxies, had finally encountered something they could not understand or counter. When it ended, the Devourer fleet was scattered and broken. The survivors had fled back into the deeper void, their invasion shattered by weapons that belonged in museums and tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Elder Kess stood and walked to a pedestal in the center of the chamber. On it sat a simple plaque made of earth steel, inscribed with the names of every human who had died in the war. This memorial honors those who answered when the galaxy called, though the galaxy had turned them away, she read. In humanity's chaos, we found our salvation. Morrison felt his eyes burn with unshed tears. So many good people had died to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. Kelly Stone, who had piloted her damaged ship into a Devourer command vessel. Rick Turner, who had stayed behind to manually detonate a nuclear warhead when the timer failed. Tracy Mills, who had given her life to save a Federation colony ship full of civilians. Admiral Morrison, Elder Kess said, returning to her position. The Galactic Council hereby offers humanity full membership in the Federation, with all rights and privileges thereto. Morrison looked around the chamber. The same beings who had once dismissed humans as primitive barbarians now waited for his answer with obvious hope. The Council also offers humanity equal representation in all Federation decisions, Kess continued, including permanent seats on this council and joint command of all Federation military forces. Morrison thought about the conditions that Commander Parks had prepared: equal treatment for human colonies, shared technology programs, joint exploration missions. Everything that humanity had dreamed of when they first reached for the stars. Furthermore, Kess said, the Federation formally requests that humanity establish joint training programs to teach our military forces human tactical doctrine. Morrison almost smiled at that. The same chaotic, unpredictable thinking that had gotten humanity rejected was now being requested as essential education for galactic defense. Elder Kess, members of the Council, Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly. Through the chamber, humanity accepts membership in the Galactic Federation. The chamber erupted in a sound that Morrison had never heard before, 12 different alien species cheering together in harmony. However, Morrison continued, and the chamber fell silent. We have conditions, Elder Kess nodded. State your terms. First, the memorial to human sacrifice will be placed in the main hall of this station, where every Federation citizen can see it and remember what it costs to save the galaxy. Agreed. Second, humanity will have equal voice in all Federation decisions, not just those relating to military matters. Agreed. Third, any species that requests Federation protection will be required to contribute to their own defense. No more passive civilizations hiding behind others. Elder Kess paused, considering the implications. That will require significant changes to Federation policy. The Devourers taught us that pacifism is a luxury the galaxy cannot afford, Morrison replied. Everyone needs to be ready to fight for what they believe in. Agreed. Morrison looked at the memorial plaque, thinking of all the humans who would never see this moment. Finally, humanity requests the right to establish colonies in the space between galaxies. Someone needs to watch for the next threat. You believe the Devourers will return? Asked Vel-9. Maybe not the Devourers, Morrison said, but something will. There are always new threats in the universe, and when they come, we'll be ready. Elder Kess raised her arms in the traditional Federation gesture of welcome. Admiral Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Federation, we welcome humanity as equals among the stars. Morrison walked to the memorial plaque and placed his hand on the cold steel. We did it, he whispered to the names carved there. We proved we belong. As he turned back to face the Council, Morrison saw something that would have been impossible. A year ago, humans and aliens working together as equals, preparing for whatever challenges the universe might bring, the galaxy had not trusted humans until they answered the call for help. But now, as Morrison looked at the mixed crews serving on Federation ships and the human-alien research teams developing new technologies, he knew that trust had been earned. Humanity had found its place among the stars not through diplomacy or advanced technology, but through the simple willingness to fight for others when fighting seemed hopeless. And in a universe full of wonders and terrors, that willingness to stand up and fight for what was right might be the most important quality of all. Outside the station's viewing ports, human and alien ships patrolled together, watching the edge of the galaxy for new threats. Ready to answer when the universe called again,